All right. I'm so pleased to welcome you to our second webinar of 2023 series. My name is Satwinder Paul. I'm an assistant teaching professor and program coordinator for the Water and Wastewater Technology Program and co-creator of the Online Help Center for BC Small Water Systems. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that Thompson River University campuses are on the traditional lands of the Kamloops to Secwepemc and the Tekselec within Secwepemc Ulu, the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwepemc people. Thompson River University, with their partner, hosts an annual webinar series and courses dedicated to providing technical information, resources, and tools to all small water system owners and operators and Indigenous small water system on issues of treatment, regulations, operations, maintenance, and water quality monitoring. The Online Hub Center strives to assist all small water systems in BC to implement the multi-barrier approach to drinking water in order for systems to consistently provide safe, potable drinking water to their communities in compliance with government regulation. These webinars are scheduled for every 2 months and is offered free of charge for attendees who are EOCP certified operators. Each webinar will count as 0.1 CEUs towards your certification. A certification of completion is issued at the end of the webinar through the webinar system via an email. We will have 1 hour of presentation, then followed by half an hour of question period. During the duration of the presentations, if you have any questions, please jot them down, and then we will make sure that we cover them during the Q&A period. Today, our webinar focuses on groundwater and well legislation and an overview for well owners and well operators. Our presenter is Laurie Lyons. Laurie is a groundwater protection officer with the Province Ministry of Forest South Area Groundwater Science Program based in Kamloops. Laurie Lyons has 17 years experience as a groundwater protection officer, inspecting groundwater wells, providing advice and educating well owners and operators on the importance of good well maintenance and well operation to protect the groundwater resource and to provide safe drinking water quality. In this presentation, Laurie will provide a brief overview of groundwater wells and the legislation that protects them. She will also explain how aquifers affect the availability of water that can be pumped from a well. Water quantity and water quality is not only a reflection of the natural environment, but also of well construction, maintenance, and operation. This presentation will provide an overview of the legislation regulating well construction, tips on well maintenance, and well operations. Welcome, Laurie, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for the croaky voice since I've got this awful cold and cough that I can't seem to shake. But anyway, what I'm going to speak to you today is on the groundwater and wells, and it's an overview for the well owner or well operator, and hopefully provide info on common well problems, dispel some groundwater myths, give you some understanding of groundwater, some legislation regarding groundwater and wells, and understanding how your well works, as well as some resources that are available on the ministry website. Yes, many of the common groundwater well problems involve water quantity and quality. These may be naturally occurring or from a man-made issue. Identifying the cause of the well problem is necessary to determine what treatment to use to effectively fix the problem. Early detection and diagnosis of a well problem may prevent you from having to decommission the well and drill a replacement well. Detecting a decline in the well's capacity is key to successful rehabilitation. The well's capacity declines greater than 20%. Generally, preventative maintenance is no longer going to be effective, and chemical or mechanical rehabilitation will be required. So understanding well deterioration causes is essential to designing effective preventive maintenance and monitoring programs. Your groundwater knowledge and understanding your components of your well and how properly to maintain them will help ensure well yield is sustained and protect your water quality. To groundwater. There's 1% of the water on this world is usable, and 99% of that is groundwater. Groundwater fills the pores and fissures of substrate material. Groundwater moves very, very slowly. It's measured in feet or centimeters per day, month, year, or decade. Thus, the water you use from your well is often years old, or it can be hundreds of years old. In comparison, surface water rates are measured in feet or centimeters per second per day. Another myth is that there's lots of water and doesn't need to be conserved. That's not exactly true, as pumping groundwater at a rate greater than the recharge rate, which is replenishment of the aquifer, deletes aquifer storage capacity, resulting in serious groundwater mining. And subsidence is known throughout the world. Probably 80% of subsidence is from groundwater in the US. Parts of Mexico have dropped 10 meters in 70 years, which is a lot. The amount of water on Earth remains constant. Basically, ever since the Big Bang happened, we have the same amount of water now as we did then. What is different is where it's stored. The hydrological cycle describes the continuous movement of water on and above the Earth's surface. Water moves from one reservoir to the next, glacier, ocean, and groundwater, by physical processes of evaporation, condensation, infiltration, runoff, and subsurface flow, as it changes through its states of liquid, vapor, and moving through the closed loop water cycle. This here is a schematic of a typical BC interior aquifer. The bedrock is formed from folded and faulted volcanic and sedimentary rocks. The valleys are carved out by glaciation. The glaciers melt, they deposit layers of silts and gravels. Then a river courses through the alluvial deposits, carving out cliffs of silt layers and gravels. Wells drilled in the lower valley aquifer bottom are very highly productive, and these wells are often connected to a surface water body, depending on the substrate that they are completed in. The permeability of the materials affects the rate of precipitation infiltration, storage capacity, as well as the rate of contamination movement. The upper sand and gravel aquifers are very vulnerable to subsurface contamination. Deeper aquifers are below a low silty confining clay layer are less vulnerable to the surface contamination. Thus, well siting is important. If you have a well that's high, dry, and sealed, it's probably going to be sustained and receive less contamination than if your well is constructed in a low-lying area, not sealed, and will receive runoff. The particles of the substrate, as you can see, the water fills the fractures in the bedrock, as well as filling these pores here, as I mentioned earlier. And here's the silty clay layer, and so this is what aquifer below is the confined layer, and the one above is the unconfined layer. There's a lot of aquifer resources on our ministry website, and if you look at any of the mapping programs and you see an aquifer and then there's boundaries, but beside it there's no aquifer, that does not mean that there's no aquifer there. What it means is that we do not have enough information to delineate an aquifer in that area. Aquifer mapping provides regional context for groundwater development, enables priority setting for groundwater quantity and quality monitoring, and increases the understanding and sustainability of management of the value resource of groundwater. It also will initiate a lot of groundwater and surface water interaction studies. Well reports, well registration, and water licensing. They're all very different. The well records and consultant reports are very important. These provide you information of what type of material that your well is constructed in. They will also have the depth and screen intervals and water bearing areas. This is very important so that you get the right type of pump and the screen development is done correctly, as well as the size of the screen slots. Submission of well records became mandatory in March 1st, 2016. This is the responsibility of the well driller for drilled wells. However, for dug wells, it is the responsibility of the well owner to complete these forms and submit them to the province. Prior to March 6, 2016, well submission was voluntary, and many of the wells records were submitted by the drillers as well as well owners. And these well records are entered into our provincial database, ensuring that your well is registered. Water license is mandatory for groundwater use since March 1st, 2016. The exception is domestic use, single family dwelling. Thus, all small water systems, or most, will need a water license. Information is available on our website for water licensing and rights, as well as an application form. If there's an issue or you have questions filling out an application form, you can contact Front Counter BC. It is recommended that you apply for a BC EID prior to submitting and completing a well water licensing application, as this will allow you to save and track your application. A water license is not your health authority well construction permit. They are very different processes and through different levels of government. G-wells. You can also get different aquifer information and well information here, as well as a registry for the drillers and pump installers. You select the tab at the top of the page here and enter your information here, and you should be able to pull up your well record. All these little blue dots are the well records. On the registry, this is a requirement as well drilling and pump installing is a legislated activity, and thus we will have a registry of active and available well drillers and pump installers that can work in the province of BC. The Water Sustainability Act restricts well construction, decommission, and pump installation, and it outlines the minimum standards for all these events. And also it will give you the requirements for flowing artesian wells, and it outlines the roles and responsibilities for well drillers and well pump installers. The province issues them, the well drillers and pump installers, a card similar to what you would have like a driver's license, about that size, and it will have on there what their can do, whether it's pump installation, if it's well drilling, or what type of well drilling is it? Is it geotechnically only? Is it monitoring wells only? Or is it water supply wells? All this information will be on there. It is also in the registry. Components of your well. There's the borehole, the casing, which you can see. The surface seal, you may or may not see it, as you can install a surface seal about 1 foot below the ground surface. And the well intake in the screen, this is down at the very bottom, and there'll be a K-packer or in here, and that will keep the screen in place. Also, it may have a slotted liner, PVC liner, throughout the well casing. The pitless adapter is your connection, and it's here, and it's to your water supply system. The pump needs to be properly matched with the recommended pumping rate so that you do not draw down the water below the pump and exceed and overpump the aquifer. You will have a secure well cap on top of the well. Why hire a pump installer and well driller? It will protect your resource. It may also save you some money. Well owners are able to construct shallow wells less than 50 feet in depth, but they must be constructed to meet the groundwater protection regulations. However, it could take you days, months, years to do that, and a well driller may be able to do it in half a day or a couple days. When you open your well, if you take the well cap off, you will see wires, cables, and ropes all stuffed in on the top of your well casing. These here are very important that you do not pull them, as they are there for releasing the pump and to pull it up, as well as releasing the pitless adapter. And if you do pull on them and it does get released and it drops down, it could be quite costly because you may not have the rope anymore to pull the well pump and drop pipes out of the well. Thus, you might have to fish for them, or you might have to close the well and decommission. Also, if there's a sudden decrease in pressure, your water system will create a vacuum and your pressure tank may collapse just as this one did. Also, here's a pump that was burnt out, maybe an oversized pump for what the well capacity was. Sometimes if you don't have this information, it might be a bit of a guessing game, or to get the right size of pump and the rate of pumping. Well location, very important. You should be set back from contaminants, and contaminants should not be allowed to travel or be stored within 3 meters of the wellhead. Consider where your contamination are. Like, obviously, a sewage system is a source of contamination, and it should not be placed right beside your well. Because as you pump the well, you speed up the travel time of any contaminants. Also, wells close together, you can have interference. They are allowed if you are the owner of both wells. As in this case, this was actually a school, but rarely are you pumping both wells at the same time. They may be low producing wells and you pump one and then the other into a storage container, and then it's used from there. Also, consider where your wells are in relation to buildings. The equipment for drilling and pump installation is quite large. And if they can't get over top of the well to fix it, you may have to remove a building, or the well may have to be decommissioned and a new well drilled. Also consider where your power lines are going, as a power line over top of a well might require BC Hydro to disconnect your power so that the well can be worked on, or it may result in times of periods of shutdown for the well driller, because if the wind is blowing, those lines will move a lot and they may become entangled into the drill rig. Also consider where you're putting your buildings. If you're building your house over top your well, that's not a good idea. It becomes a confined space, and wells will off gas and without proper ventilation. There has been cases in BC as well as across Canada where people have died by breathing in these gases. What kind of well do you have? Is it abandoned, inactive, as in this first picture? This also could be an abandoned, inactive well in a pet. Do you have a dug well? Do you have a drilled well in a pit or vault, which was very common prior to the invention of a pitless adapter? This was done so that the water didn't freeze as you generally came out of the top of the well and then was on, excuse me, it went underground and connected with your water distribution system in the houses. As you can note in this here, the water was above the electrical. I'm sure this resulted in some wiring shorting out. You may have a drilled well, and the pump installer may install this plastic PVC box on the outside. This is usually for extra security and attachment of the cables and wires inside the well. Inactive and abandoned wells, they can impact your water quality. And if there's enough sedimentation going in, they might even impact your water quantity. It is your obligation, legislated, to maintain wells until they are decommissioned. Decommissioning is required after 5 years of not use. You must hire a well driller or pump installer to decommission the well. In this photo, this person is decommissioning the well. And it's probably a deep drilled well, as it's got a tremie line in, and they're pumping grout slurry into the bottom of the well, and it will gradually fill, and they will withdraw the tremie line and fill it to the top of the line and put a cap on top, and then backfill and put the pavement back. Types of well construction standards. They're very similar for dug wells as well as drilled wells. The surface steel must be installed. It needs to be 15 feet or 5 meters in length and 1 inch thick, or fill the void if you are constructing a dug well. You can also, for a dug well, give it a consistency and sort of mold it around the well casing so that it's 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters thick. Dug wells as well as drill wells, they both need secure well caps, covers. All water supply wells require a well ID plate attached to the casing. And bedrock wells. Drilled wells into bedrock must have the casing securely anchored into the bedrock for 1 meter. We recommend that PVC liner put in these wells, mainly because if you leave it as an open hole and you have your pump in there, it's not a legislative activity to have the liner, but if that rock falls off and wedges between your pump and the borehole wall, you may not get that pump out, and that could be very costly. You may have to decommission it to fix it because you can't get the pump out. And also, when you are having a bedrock well drilled, the well driller will note on there where the water-bearing fractures are. This is very important for the well and pump installer, because you have to size the pump and place the pump so that the drawdown cone, which is here, as you're pumping, it'll draw down the water level in the well. It must not come down into or below these fractures, as this could dewater the fracture, decreasing your water quantity, and also impacting your water quality, because it could introduce bacteria into these water column, and it will change the water chemistry of the well. Wells and pits, they also must meet the well construction standards. You must have a stick up of 1 foot above the ground surface, a secure well cap, and they must be drained. If they are not draining properly and the pump kicks in, often that water can be sucked down into your well, impacting your water quality. If a well is altered, we highly encourage well owners to bring the pits above ground surface. And if not, then a professional needs to be hired to design the pit and oversee the construction. And same for new constructing new wells and pits. These designs and as-built drawings must be submitted to the province for approval prior to construction. Removing a well from a pit or a vault, you must hire a well driller or pump installer. If it's a flowing well, you must hire a well driller. With confined space entry certification, removing the cribbing, extend the casing, install the pitless adapter, surface seal, backfill grader on the wellhead, and attach the well LED plate. Surface seals. Here you can see that the surface seal is continuous in the photograph on the right here. And you can see that it completely fills the borehole. And once the pump installer is done installing the water distribution line here, then they will reinstall the surface seal and backfill. Here you can see the grout at the ground surface. Grout will also be for flowing artesian wells or high pressure wells between multiple casings. And you can see that, and it will be also around the outside of this casing. If you do see an annulus appearing around your well casing, do not fill it with pea gravel. This only accentuates the movement of water as well as contaminants down along the well casing. It is your responsibility to maintain the surface seal by contacting a well driller or pump installer to replace the well surface seal. Well caps and covers. They must be secure and vermin proof. Thus, flower pots, pails, plywood, rocks, excuse me, are not sufficient well caps and covers. If you have a hand pump, it must act as a secure well cap. Punching holes or for ropes to be wrapped around the outside of the well casing will impact the well cap, and it makes it no longer a secure vermin-proof cap. Sanitary seal well caps are approved, but the bolts must be in place. These hold the plates together, and also tightening those bolts will push the rubber out and seal it against the well casing. Well casings and stick up, a requirement to help protect your water quality and in some cases the water quantity. This here dug well has holes all down the casing as well as above ground. They had thought that this would help increase the infiltration in, except for it did, as the surface runoff was directly into the well with no protection there. Also, if you're spreading fertilizers and stuff, consider where you're spreading close to your well, as these can pellets melt when water comes, and you don't notice or maybe taste or smell the fertilizer in there. It is only detectable if you are taking regular chemical water samples and having them tested by the lab. Here's a well in a pit. You can see critters floating and everything, so the water isn't draining. The caps get damaged as you drive across them. Also, the influx of increased amount of water flowing from the top of the well also deteriorates your well casing faster. And in this case, this well, the cap, when I removed it, you could see large amounts of flakes and chunks falling off the well casing and going down into the well. This can eventually plug off your well screen, decreasing your water quantity, as well as they may become lodged between your well pump and the casing and prevent you from removing your well pump in case it needs to be replaced or repaired. Wellhead accessible and protected. You must protect them from physical damage. Well casings, even if they're steel, they can become damaged and dented, and you will not be able to remove the pump. PVC, if it deteriorates in sunlight, and also they spiral or fracture if you hit them. Keeping contaminants and trees and things back from the wellhead. Roots, they love holes in well casings, and this will decrease your amount of availability of the water for your distribution system. This here well does not have a cap on it. There was about 1 foot of debris in that well. I was amazed that it was still working. As I mentioned before, contaminants should be 3 meters back from the wellhead. Even though this well is very clean, it is open to the dug well below the floor. If these paint cans spill, there is the potential for it to flow directly into the well. Also, this rope, if it's exposed, it deteriorates. Also, there's potential here for more contamination to get into your well. And here you can see that even rodents have been chewing on the wires and stuff. So protecting your well and your source of water. Good summary for the legislation. Where are your contaminants stored? Location of your well. Protect your well casing from damage. It must have a stick up of 1 foot above ground. Replace a damaged or lost well ID plate. Have a secure well cap. Keep the ground sloped so water doesn't pool around it, and fill any visible annular space with sealant. Artesian flow from a well must be controlled. This can cause flooding damage and subsidence. It may lower the confining pressure and affect neighboring wells, springs, streams. Artesian wells must be constructed and decommissioned by a water well driller. If artesian flow is encountered suddenly, you should contact and get a well driller or professional that is competent with drilling and controlling flows on site immediately. Flowing artesian wells are under control when they're clear of sediment and the flow is entirely through the casing. Here you can see the flow is coming outside of the casing. They must be mechanically controlled either with a shutoff valve or with a mechanical packer that is installed outside the well casing. This is great for low flow wells, and this is the preferred method with a big shutoff valve for high flow wells. Often they will have multiple casings, and even other wells that are under pressure will have multiple casings to ensure that the pressure is not loosening the casing, as well as flow is contained below surface and through the casing. It is your responsibility, as I mentioned, to hire a well driller or professional with experience of flowing artesian well. It must be stocked or controlled. Also, alternate specifications can be submitted for approval. Understand the maintenance and operational requirements for artesian flow wells, because they will be equipped with pressure gauges, backflow preventers, and you must be able to maintain these equipment. Aquifer depletion. It is not always from flowing wells. It could be overuse, drought, climate change, and also if you had noticed a drop in well yield, it may not be. It could be something that's happening down a hole in your well. This is a provincial observation well. We measure the water level hourly and periodically the water chemistry. From this is generated state of environment reports that are available on the website. They will say if this aquifer that it's completed in is stable, declining, it's increasing. So yeah, and there's lots of information. Also, with the observation wells, you can look at the hydrographs and you can see for the interior aquifers that the main recharge happens in the spring from the snow melt, and there is a smaller recharge in the fall from precipitation. In the coastal aquifers, it will be the reverse. The spring will have only a smaller recharge from the snow melt. The main recharge for coastal aquifers is in the fall, and that's from precipitation. Well interference occurs when large volumes are pumped, resulting in water loss in neighboring wells, streams. It can be accentuated by dry conditions and dewatering of bedrock microfractures. Over pumping is the main cause of premature pump and well failure. And this increases the rate of corrosion, incrustation, biofouling, and sediment movement into your well. Just as a reminder, wells should be 15 meters apart, or alternate specs can be provided and approved by the province. Aquifer depletion and interference. It's good to have a slow, steady pumping versus hard and fast. Learn to share the resource, decommission or control flowing artesian wells. And if these preventative measures are not successful, you may have to drill a well deeper or install a cistern for water storage. Water quality and quantity. There's lots of downhole impacts. Some of these are naturally occurring minerals, and as I mentioned, you can't always smell, taste toxic minerals. This needs to be tested. It's good to have a lab do these tests and do it periodically, just so that you know if there's any changes over time. You can do half tests in between, and it'll give you a rough idea, but lab tests are definitely preferred. Other impacts that can occur downhole, the well casing deterioration. This one here is probably one of the more severe ones that have been noted. Usually, and I did show a picture of the flaking earlier. If it carries on, it will totally deteriorate. Biofouling, mineral incrustation, and sediment plugging are all other downhole impacts. Biofouling, what is it? Nuisance bacteria that accumulate in your well. Usually they're iron related, sulfate reducing, and other slime forming bacteria. Pumping a well increases the nutrients and oxygen, leading to an increase in production of slime in groundwater susceptible to bacterial conditions. It will also increase the corrosion of steel and iron parts of your well. It's an impact to your well and water distribution. It will also decrease your well yield and water quality. Excuse me. And also, I mentioned earlier, if you have your well in your crawl space or anything, can you imagine pulling this up through your house if you fix your well pump? You might be doing a lot of flooring reinstallation. What you'll notice is slime buildup on plumbing fixtures. There'll be a water discoloration. You will also see staining of your laundry. You may have a rotten egg smell. There also could be black precipitate if it's manganese, and it's orange if it is iron. It will decrease your yield, as I mentioned, and corrosion is a big part. Biofouling, what can you do? Detecting for the biofouling bacteria is very hard, but if you are regularly testing your well and you notice that there is an increase in bacteria, E. coli or antibacteria or anything in your well, usually these also get trapped in this biofouling as it builds and stuff. So it's good then to disinfect your well. Contact your well driller and pump installer, and you may want to clean the well before disinfecting. Mineral incrustation. And here's our photos where you can see the incrustation on the outside of the structures as well as inside the pipe. Changes in pressure and temperature during pumping allow the dissolved minerals, calcium and magnesium, to precipitate and plug your well intake and pipes. They also may affect your material, aquifer material around the outside of the well, clogging your well. They can also stick to your spring and decrease the water availability to your well. Actually, mineral incrustation is probably more common in shallow wells or highly mineralized bedrock aquifers. Some symptoms is buildup of material on your plumbing fixtures and inside your well. You may notice a decrease in your well yield. You can perform a chemical analysis to determine the risk of your incrustation, reduce your pumping rate, and go for longer pumping intervals may help the rate of incrustation. Hire a well driller, a pump installer to clean your well. This here, the brush goes up and down in the well. It's actually pretty cool, and when they put some of the chemicals in, it's all this foaming and cleaning. And this here is when they're pumping out after they clean. It is quite a lot of goop that can come out of your well. Sediment plugging. Excuse me. What is it? Sediment plugs your well screens and your surrounding aquifer. It is accentuated by poor well design and construction. This is where your well screen may not have been the correct slot size for your material that it was in. If it was the screen was very large and you had fine sand, it'll be even moving faster into your well than it should, and clogging up everything and decreasing your water availability. Also, it could be from inadequate pump development. When they pump the well, when they first drill it, they pump out all the sediment that is stirred up as they are drilling. And also sediment plugging can happen if you're over pumping your well. You will notice sediment in your water, a decrease in the well yield. Wells won't provide the amount of water they used to. The static water level will probably remain the same, but the water level declines when pumping. Existing wells, you can reduce the pumping rate, provide storage, ask a professional to look at your well. Any new wells, make sure that you talk to well drillers and pump installers about the proper design and development to ensure your system is designed to meet your needs as well as based on the well capacity. When to test a well. Definitely test a well in early spring after freshet, just in case any bacteria loading has moved into your well, or there's maybe gone down this casing, you didn't notice that there was an annular space developed around the outside of your well. Also, after any major plumbing work or work on your well pump, after you move into a new home, when you detect any changes of water color, quality, clarity, taste, often we recommend if there's new children, newborns, to have the water tested. Chemical and other parameters, you should test them every 3 to 5 years, or and preferably test during a dry period. If you are in an area where you suspect that there is chemicals or there's been a spill, you may want to test earlier just to ensure that your well has not been impacted. When to disinfect a well? Immediately after installing a new well, when you repair or replace your well pump, a distribution system, if you notice a change in your water chemistry, water clarity, color, odor, taste, when lab results are indicating you have high coliforms, when the slime is present in your tank. But before just inspecting your well, you should inspect your well. Are there sources of potential contamination near your well? Is your wellhead protected? Is this cap secure, vermin-proof? Does the well stick up above the ground surface or the floor of your well pit? Is there filled, the annulus filled with grout, and there's no spaces there that there could be leakage or no cracks in the well casing? Is it finished below grade? All these things may impact your water quality and be causing the well to deteriorate. So fix the problems maybe before disinfecting for a better result. Your groundwater and your well. It is a shared resource, family, neighbors, environment. So regular inspect your well, and upgrades and maintenance are required. Do them immediately. Don't put them off. Regular test your water. Keep good records of the water levels, testing, chlorination, repairs, maintenance, pumping test reports. All these are very important for your water system. A lot of these here reports seem to get lost for older systems or in transfer of systems from one owner to the next. But do ask for these here reports, because you may need them you may not get the same pump installer or well driller back that has worked on your well in the past. The well is only a small part of your water distribution system. So do take care of it, and it is important. It will decrease your water quality and quantity if not taken care of properly. And I believe I got finished a little bit early. So if you have any questions, I'm open for questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie, for that excellent presentation. Audience, please use the chat feature to ask your questions, and then I will read them to Laurie, and then she will respond via voice. Laurie, obviously everything that you do on a well, any maintenance, even opening the cap, it's a restricted activity, right? So you, as the owner of a well, have to call in the qualified professionals to do any maintenance on the well, because everything is really restricted. Could you speak
About the only thing you can do is take the cap off and have a look, or replace the cap if it's damaged. But anything else other than replacing a damaged cap, it is a restricted activity. With the cap though, you should look beyond that, and if there's any other damage, and then definitely contact a well driller or pump installer. And if you have an artesian well, do not take off the cap, because those wells are under pressure. And if you're not sure, definitely have a professional come and take the cap off. So,
okay.
yes.
We have a question
Yep.
from Barbara. She wants to know when a water license is needed for groundwater.
For any use but a domestic use, which is a single family dwelling. So most water systems require a water license. There's lots more information, as I mentioned, on the website, and this will be posted so you can use those links to get to the website. If you're anxious and really want to get in there right away, groundwater wells, just Google it, make sure you got the ministry site and look under well water licensing, and there will be information there. So if you have a water system, you will probably require a water license.
And Barbara, if you can't find them, you can just send us an email and we'll send you a link to the website. Okay. We have another question, and it's about how to disinfect a well.
Disinfecting the well, you should actually contact a pump installer or a well driller to do that, mainly because it depends on the amount of volume of water in your well, and that chlorination needs to be proportioned, because if you over-chlorinate your well, you can have more problems or accentuate your problems with when you disinfect it. There is a brochure on our website that does go into well disinfection and the procedure and how to calculate that. But I highly recommend that you get a professional. And if it needs to be done regularly, I would talk to your professional about having a pipe installed in your well, and then you can take off the cap, and then as per their instructions, you can add the mixture to the well. Mainly if you start pouring it over everything, chlorine may deteriorate some of the infrastructure on top of the well, and it may not get down into the well water, depending on where in the column your water level is. So hopefully that answers your question. It's not recommended to do it yourself, because very few people know how much water volume is in their well.
Yes, yes. And usually we don't really recommend disinfecting your well anymore with chlorine. We usually recommend acid cleans in most situations. It's very rarely that you would be asked to disinfect with sodium hypochlorite now. So, okay. Jennifer asks, could you explain the difference in jurisdiction for the Water Sustainability Act between the Ministry of Forests and the new Ministry of Water, Land, Resource Stewardship?
The water, land, and resource stewardship are the policy part of, and the Ministry of Forests is the action portion, is the simplest answer. And we work very closely together. We sit in on multiple meetings together. So yeah, that's sort of the division though. It's the policy and the boots on the ground type of folks.
Okay. So the Ministry of Forest is more enforcement, while the other ministry is policy. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. We have another question from Al. Is automatic sprinkler system considered domestic use, or does this need to be registered?
Okay, an automatic sprinkler system. Are you like, is this for like your lawn? Or is this like a huge irrigation? Because if it's for a small garden or small plot of lawn, it will be considered part of your domestic. But if you're irrigating a large amount of area, it will require a water license.
Like if you're doing a hay field or you're doing.
Yeah, even a large fairway, or even a large, if you have an acreage or a large area of lawn, I like, you will require a water license to irrigate that plot of land. And well registration is different than water licensing. Well registration just means that your well is in the provincial groundwater database. Water licensing is a different department, and they will be issuing the license to you. Like, I don't do the water licensing, that's a different department.
Brian asks, if there are more than 2 single-family dwellings on a well or surface water supply, do I need a license or a home-based business?
I would contact the front counter. You probably will. There might be situations when you don't need a water license for that, but I suspect that in most cases, you would need a water license.
Okay. Next question is, can chemicals be used to restore well yield?
Yes, in that one picture, where the water was, or that was foaming out of the top of the well casing, they had put chemicals in the well to rehabilitate the well, and that was the reaction. It's sort of like if you put baking soda and vinegar together and you get that foaming action. That's exactly what some of the chemicals will do, and it will clean out the well casing. You should not be doing that. You should be hiring a professional to do those kind of things for you.
Yeah. Usually a pump installer can do any of those maintenance on your well. So, and then again, Laurie shared a qualified well registry site where you can find a nearest profession to your location. Okay. Can a health authority engineer designate an alternative to licensed well driller installer? We are a remote water system, no licensed installers in area to get one, and their equipment here on ferries can cost up to $50,000 for mobile, demobile before any work is done. So basically, the cost of having this work done by a professional in an isolated area. So the question is about that.
That is a tough one. If you're not supposed to, I don't know how to answer this one. You must have the professional do the work. The only way you could maybe do that is if you get a rapport with the professional and they provide you some guidance. But if you're doing drilling a well, I'm sorry, you will have to find a well driller, and yes, it's going to take time and money to get to a remote area. But there's no other ways to get around that. There's no exemption unless you are, it's a minor repair and you can work under that person. But you would have to have a pretty good rapport with them and they would have to be able to trust your work. So they probably have been at your place before and maybe explained how to do some work, and if you need some maintenance done, and then maybe they'll give you some guidance of what you can do to your well, and you're working under them. But otherwise, no, you will have to budget in for that extra cost.
So there's no leeway, like, I mostly deal with the drinking water supply wells, but there are no other leeways, like if you're building an irrigation well or you're doing a dug well for drinking water for animals, domestic animals. So there's no leeways for any other kind of wells, eh?
Well, dug wells are you can construct them. They have to meet the standards. So if you are doing that, you don't have to have a driller, but you have to do the standards, and you must submit all the paperwork, as I mentioned. So it's best to contact a groundwater protection officer if you are constructing a dug well. There is also a brochure on dug well construction on the website, but you still will need a pump installer to install the pump, unless you are putting in, it's with a shallow dug well under 50 feet, you could probably put in a jet pump, which would be in your pump house, and then all you're doing is putting a drop line and a foot valve into your well, and that you could do on your own. But just be very careful and aware that there are regulations around some of this activity, and you would want to be sticking to the activities that you can do.
Exactly. Okay. Another question from Jack. Would a single family dwelling with a detached coach house sharing one well require a water license?
That's similar to the other question with two dwellings on the same property. They may not require a water license, but I would inquire through front counter. I don't do the water licensing, and that has to be approved through other channels.
Okay. Yeah, so if you're supplying water to multiple dwelling from then it becomes a water supply system and has multiple connections. So yeah, I really don't know how to answer that question either. So okay.
Yeah, generally it is like there is certain exemptions, but I don't know all the exemptions under the water licensing, and you can read on the website, but I would contact, the best place to get that information is by contacting front counter. There is front counter offices, as well as there's a 1-800 number, and it's 188 something. So
Okay. Jordan asks, is there a typical maintenance schedule for wells, annual disinfection, pump maintenance, and so on?
Generally not. It depends on what you're doing, and that you would set up with your pump installer when they come and do install the pump. And because most pumps, like if you are like, some pumps can last 10 years or more. So the maintenance is more with regards to, if it's a flowing artesian well, you should have regular inspections of the equipment. And even if on a regular well, every time you go past the well, make sure that it's hasn't changed, like what you can see. Is there an annulus appearing? Is the cap still good? Is there something banged into it? So I would say you should do at least a yearly inspection. but even more often, especially in high traffic areas or areas where people can be walking by and hang on it or do whatever, because not all wells are out of the way. Some wells for businesses are right beside the parking lot. Maybe they've been hit. I would check those ones like monthly. And also, if you start to notice any decline in your water quality or quantity, definitely have it inspected by a professional.
Yeah, and we usually recommend that you keep data on how much water you draw from the well. So your pumping hours, your drawdown, your well yield, your specific capacity, all these are really good data to have on a regular basis. And then usually that data tells you a lot about the, the health of your well, its ability to produce water. Is really important. And then again, the water quality as well too. So, Martin asked, how long does it take to install a new well for a town or city? Go through jurisdiction before install of a new well. So, how long does it take to? I think he's asking like from the beginning to the end, like locating a well and installing a well and all the paperwork that needs to be done.
Well, for if it's a municipality well, it's you may have to. There'll be a whole planning process, and more of that will be with budget and location, where they need the well for, what part of the growth of the city may come from. For smaller systems, it may be a lot less time. It may be days, months, versus for a municipal, it could take a year or two to get all the funding in place, because you would have to have it's probably more the funding than the location. The location is important, but you can, like if you have a small site, like if you are like a mobile home park with a small water system and you're maybe on like 5 acres, there may only be like 2 or 3 places that you can put the well, because you need to have the setbacks from, any sources of contamination, setbacks from any of your other wells, unless you're decommissioning that certain existing well. So it's sort of site specific. And then also what the well is being drilled into will also take a different amount of time. If you have a sand and gravel well, the driller may drill that well in one day. If you have a deep bedrock well, that could take maybe a week to drill. If you're constructing a shallow dug well, that may take you 3 or 4 days. So the location and everything, and the funding that you may need, if you're a small water system, you may have to budget that in, or apply for grants. So I would start looking at least a year ahead of time, just to make sure that you have everything in place. As for paperwork, there is no permits required to drill a well. For most situations, the permit in process would be for the water supply wells would be done through Interior Health or your health authority. Then you would need a water license, which would come after the well is drilled and before you use it. And that could take anywhere from 90 days to a few years, depending on the size of the well and the impacts, because you would have to go through negotiations with other users if you were a large well that was pumping a large amount of water. So there's a lot of variables to consider when you start to put in a well, and the size of your well will dictate a lot of that information. It's not a very good answer, but it's sort of site specific in what type of well you are doing.
Okay. Joe asks, Sumas Mountain is under a lot of rock and gravel, mining about 2 kilometers above our reservation. Our wells are ground average depth. We are concerned about blasting, shaking the front of the mountain. Should we be taking some kind of action, protecting our reservoirs and water sources? So I guess there's a lot of activity going on.
Does he mention how deep these wells are? Are they, I take it are they bedrock wells? Does he mention that?
No, he doesn't.
Okay. If it depends on how close the blasting is, and if you
Sorry, Laurie, he does mention that their aquifer is on the edge of the gravel mining area, and mining can be seen from maps at Sumas Mountain. So.
okay. Yeah, the edge of the aquifer, it also depends, like what maybe the well's close if you're right at the blasting area. If you are noticing impacts, it would be probably prudent to have a discussion with the company or some kind of negotiations, because there may be impacts, but a lot of times the blasting will not impact your well. There has been a few cases where it's been very close to a well, and I have dealt with impacts to a well, but a lot of times there's no impacts. So it's a lot of it's site specific, but if you are noticing impacts, you may want to reach out to a groundwater protection officer or through the RAP line to say that you are having impacts, and maybe even the company.
Okay. Okay. Lenny asks, did you mention how you get involved in the inspection of these wells? Is it by a complaint?
Generally, it is complaint driven. It does not have to be complaint driven. We do work with a lot of water system users as well as health authorities, and we do periodic sort of inspections to assist and help identify any potential impacts or deterioration of the well. So those are pre-active, but a good percentage of them, it is based on complaints.
I just also wanted to mention to the attendees that last year we did a webinar in 2022 on the operation and maintenance of water supply wells. So please go into our last year archive schedule and you'll see the YouTube on the presentation and a PowerPoint presentation available if you would like to review that. It has a lot of good information as to how to operate and maintain a well. Okay. Will you be dealing with groundwater registration of ponds? That's
well.
Will you deal with groundwater registration of ponds?
Of ponds, no. Of surface water bodies, no. Dugouts require a water license. So, so if you are constructing a dugout or creating that pond, you will be required to get a water license. And then they will be registered through, it wouldn't be registered in the same way as a well, but they would be noted as in the water licensing process.
In regards to Joe's question about blasting, Blake has shared a reference that they had a same problem with 8 wells. We went straight to the licensing agent and they installed seismic sensors to protect them themselves. So that if you do go to a licensing agent, you may be able to get some sensors put in to measure the seismic impacts from all the blasting to your wells. So
thank you. That's good to know.
The provincial manual, well water disinfection using the simple chlorination manual method, suggests that well owners use chlorine to disinfect their wells. In the presentation, acid was suggested as a better alternative. Is there a provincial document available for acid disinfection and flushing?
No, we haven't done one for acid, unless there's one done through your Ministry of Health, but the Groundwater has not put one out through for acid. We usually recommend that you contact the well pump installer for use of acids in your well.
Yeah, so usually it is the pump installers that will know what surfactants to use for doing on any maintenance work and exactly what to use. So they do have products now that are made and designed for wells, keeping water quality in mind and protection of the aquifer in mind. So there are products out there that are designed specifically for well maintenance and so on. But again, pump installer is your best guidance towards that if there's none available on any of the websites.
And one thing that they will use is if you had a recent lab test for all the water quality on that's the chemical parameters and anions and cations, they will use that. And if you haven't had one done recently, they will require to do one so that they know exactly what level of chemical that they will need to use on your well.
I'm just okay, hold on. I'm just trying to make a sense of this question. It's Barbara. She says, a year ago, with the confirmation of my application, but nothing else, where do I follow up with BC government? So I think it might be related to the pond question. So where can she follow up?
Actually, if she has submitted a water application, she should have gotten a notification with like a job number or something, because I don't do this, so I'm not sure exactly, but there would be a number associated with that. And if with your BCE ID, you should be able to go in and track that. And if you're having difficulties and figuring out the websites and how to track that through BCE ID, I would contact Front Counter BC. And if it is, they should be able to look that information up for you. Your best bet is to contact Front Counter BC.
Okay. Okay, so Barbara, to contact the Front Counter BC if you have an ID number or a job number, and hopefully they'll be able to assist you. I think that's it for our questions. If our participants have more questions, please, again, send them to our email and we will do our best to answer those questions post this presentation. and we'll make sure that those questions are addressed. Laurie, thank you very much for answering those questions and being patient with me reading them to you. I just want to let the participant know that our next webinar is scheduled for March 21st, same time, 11 to 12:30, and it's on harmful algal blooms, what should be done. And then again, post this presentation, you will receive your certificates automatically for your EOCP CEUs. So watch out for those in your emails. Okay. Thank you to everyone for attending, and then I hope to see you guys all at our next presentation. And thank you again so much, Laurie.
Oh, thank you.